Recall expands to include 7 million pounds of deli
Nearly
meat.
150 sick and salmonella outbreak affecting 11
E. coli
countries.
outbreak in the U.S. kills 10 and sickens hundreds.
All these headlines about food safety. This isn't just policy, it's personal. Behind every recall, every outbreak, and every regulation, there's someone whose life was permanently changed or lost. I know that because I am one of them.
Welcome to Confessions of a Food Safety A-Hole. I'm Gennette Zimmer.
And I'm Dr. Darin Detweiler, former submarine guy, longtime food safety advocate, author, and someone who's been speaking up for over 3.5 decades, even when it wasn't easy or popular.
This isn't your average food safety podcast. We're not talking about bacteria and best practices. We won't be teaching you the proper temperature to cook a chicken breast.
165.
Or even how to pronounce Listeria monocytogenes.
Not even close.
We're diving into the culture, the conflicts, and the human cost of getting it wrong.
We'll share stories, some painful, some funny, all true. Revealing the real experiences of someone who's spent a lifetime behind the scenes.
These aren't stories you read about in newspapers or magazines, and they're not found on conference agendas. What they are everyday experiences of people who have dedicated their lives to making sure you have access to safe food.
Because when it comes to protecting every plate, it's not just policy and data. It's personal. And it's time we start talking about it like it is.
All right, welcome back to Confessions of a Food Safety A-Hole. Today is going to be a little bit of revisiting some topics that we started out earlier this year that we kind of wanted to expand upon for you all to listen. So before we actually get into the conversation, there was one thing that I really wanted you to do
Okay.
beforehand, because I feel like we've kind of gotten away from it. Like, part of the whole idea of this podcast was that you would be telling some of the crazy stories that you had to actually be a food safety a-hole about. And I feel like we've kind of gotten away from telling those stories. We haven't really told a good story in a while. So when we did the accountability episode last time with Bill Marler, I think we had so much more of a longer interview with Bill that we kind of lost track of the ability to tell the story. So I really want you to tell the story about when we first moved here and you were walking around town, and what did you see?
Yeah, well, we go on long drives and we jot down some ideas.
Yes.
And sometimes it's the sheer act of driving. I remember when we were driving back from Salinas, you made a comment about how many times you've driven by the agricultural fields, and to some extent it almost becomes like a blur.
Yes.
Like you just can't pay attention to everything. Well, we live in a coastal town near Los Angeles, and this is really the first time in my true working adult life that I live where I work and I work where I live. And I honestly, I know this might sound crazy, but I love being able to walk to the post office or walk to the grocery store, walk to the dry cleaners, walk to the newspaper.
Yeah, our town is very
Walk in
charming,
town.
and I love that everything is so close.
Oh, and you know what? Everyone has their different thing. But I just kind of love, in a way, it's almost like I'm more connected. I'm not passing through. It's not a blur like the agricultural fields like you were talking about, right?
Right.
And as a result, there are times where I kind of pay attention to what's going on, and now I slip back into the food safety kind of guy. And a while back, I think I was actually still testing paths that I really wanted to walk regularly. And I found myself walking past this chicken restaurant on Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, okay. There's a chicken restaurant, right? Another day, I'm walking past the chicken restaurant, and it was a different time. It was like, it wasn't open this time. It was clearly earlier in the morning.
Yeah, it was much earlier because you were doing like walking around at like 7, 8 a.m.
Yeah.
before you actually had to start your day.
But I noticed that there were boxes in front of this store, and there were boxes of tomatoes and avocados, a lot of the likely things. There were napkins and, to-go containers, but there was also like salad dressing and potato salad, avocados, tomatoes, some
Just
other
all
salads.
stacked up outside the store.
Just box after box after box stacked up. And the first thought I had was, hey guys, you guys got a delivery, but there was no one there.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. Now we're talking, this is on the curb. This is not like in a secure area or off the beaten path. These literally are boxes on the curb on Main Street.
The
sitting right
driver
there.
like literally drove up, dropped it off at the curb, and drove away.
Yeah, like some scene from some kind of a sitcom. Stop, box, get back in. Right?
Yeah.
And, the store wasn't open. There's not much I can do, right? So I continue on my walk, but I kind of walked around the block. I came back again. And I would say probably 30, 40 minutes later, I was back in that same spot. And I noticed boxes are still there.
Still there.
Store
and
still closed. However, there was a noticeable difference with the avocados and the tomatoes.
Right. You notice like they were getting robbed.
Yeah.
Basically.
There was less of them.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, okay, this is crazy. And
this happened like several days in a row that you
Yeah.
were noticing this happening.
but this last time when I'm finally like, all right, I'm going to go beyond knocking on the door and I need to check things out a little bit. Well, first off, I had taken some pictures and posted them on LinkedIn of what I was seeing. And I made sure there was no identifiable,
Sure.
no one could see who the company was. And there were a lot of comments about this. And it became one of those, tell me what's wrong with this.
Yeah.
Tell me what's wrong with this. And the list kept growing and growing and growing. It was not only theft, it was temperature control, it was chain of custody, it was rodent, pest issues, it was, so many things, right? But I noticed that this time I found like shipping label, bill of lading, right? I found some paperwork and I took a picture of the paperwork. And what I was able to do was essentially, well, here is the company that was doing the distribution, the delivery, right? And I had the contact information for the restaurant, and I had the information about, for one of them, there was boxes. There were like 2 boxes clearly labeled, fresh produce from this farm.
Right.
And even the distribution company, the company that was dropping it off, their company was like, we're proud to be FSMA compliant. We're proud to be this. We're proud to be this kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, what they say is not necessarily
What
reflective
they're
in terms of
doing.
what I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
So now I'm trying to be a good guy, and I'm trying to be very much authentic to what I've always been. Like the person in the middle of that Venn diagram, that now I've got all these pieces and parts that those pieces and parts weren't communicating with each other, but I was able to see there was a gap here.
Right.
So I reached out to the restaurant, and I actually got a call back from the owner of the company. Small chain.
Right.
And, oh yeah, we don't serve breakfast, so we typically get in around 10 or 11 and we start with the lunch thing. But we didn't have any idea how early these were being distributed.
We didn't know they were being delivered at 7 a.m.
Right.
So sitting out there for like, what? You said they open at what time?
Well, here's what's crazy. I found out how early it was distributed later, but they didn't open until like 10 or 11, but
Right.
this was 7 o'clock in the morning.
Right. So it's like at least 2.5 hours. You assume that maybe they come in like
Sure.
30 minutes to an hour early.
Sure.
So it's like at least 2 to 2.5 hours
Right.
that this stuff is sitting out there.
But I later found out that they were delivered in the 6 o'clock hour.
Oh, so it was even earlier.
Yeah. So when I talked with the company, I talked about theft, about chain of custody, about rodent control, about all these different things, about, what they promised their consumers and what they're doing. And not only did we leave with we'll talk to our distributors, but I also talked with them about the idea that maybe they should demand that there's a timestamp,
Yeah.
like a photo and timestamp somehow on their delivery, because they clearly
Yeah.
had no idea how early these are being delivered. I talk with the farm. And the farm folks, I talked to their FSQA lead, and I'm like, look, I'm not trying to rat anyone out. I just want you to realize that this is what I'm observing, and your name is on this. And they were like, okay, we really need to think about our contracts with, the companies we do distributing, because what actions that someone else takes down the road
reflects on them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It might as well be their action.
Yeah.
Right? I talked to the health department. Health department was like, yeah, this does seem problematic. Again, I'm not telling anyone, of the players involved here. But it really was an eye-opener. 'Cause again, I'm not the police. I'm not mad. I'm not a bad customer. I'm not trying to ask for a refund. I'm not an inspector. I want you to know this. So I was really happy that the restaurant and the farm and even the health department were very happy that I was connecting these dots.
Right.
But then I got to the distribution company finally.
The people who are actually responsible for this issue as a whole.
Right. And I got a lot of excuses. It reminded me of the Tex-Mex place from Nashville.
Yeah.
Oh, it was kerneling. Oh, it was dark. Oh, they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
What this version was, gas prices, we want to go early because of traffic and the heat of the day and all that kind of stuff. And we have routes and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, but that's no excuse for why are you dropping off pallets of food, some of which is perishable and not enclosed, literally on the curb in front of a closed restaurant, and you think that's okay?
To leave for several hours.
And this wasn't just one occasion. This was a pattern that was going on time after time after time.
Right.
And this was one of those things where it's crazy how that 50%. Some participants I talk with, I was being thanked. And here I'm talking with someone about the same issue, and now I'm the a-hole.
Right.
Because I'm disrupting their distribution practices or whatever. And I'm not asking for anything other than you need to consider the fact that the store is not even open and that they don't... You know what it is? It's that asymmetrical information, if you will. It's almost bullying when it comes to information. They were not communicating to the restaurant that they were dropping it off that early in the hour.
Right.
If they were saying, oh, by the way, we're going to drop it off 3 or 4 hours before you even open, maybe they would have asked for something different.
That, or they could have made accommodations to having somebody there to receive the food and bring it in so that it's not sitting out, so that the refrigerated stuff could get refrigerated right away. Or
we need to show up at 7 a.m. on Tuesdays or something like that because we get the delivery on Tuesdays.
Right.
But that wasn't the approach. The approach was, who the hell are you? Because clearly you're the a-hole and bringing this up to our attention kind of thing. Yeah. Now, I will share the fact that I've walked past there many, many times and I've never seen this take place again.
That is interesting. So it is very possible you did have an impact on the whole process.
I'm not going to say I saved the world, but I was very okay with the fact that I'm trying to approach it not being an a-hole, but just being able to say, I noticed this and this and this and this, and hey, if you really are truly going to live up to this label of we are compliant, we are this kind of a company, you should probably know this.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how some stakeholders thanked me, some stakeholders treat me as I'm the a-hole for trying to do what is a better, healthier, safer situation. I mean, no one wants a restaurant to go out of business because of a scandal. No one wants a farm to lose their customers. That was not the goal. The goal is tighten this up, tweak this, and you're good to go.
Right.
But I was treated as thank you, a-hole.
Right.
One of these things was not like the other.
Yeah. And of course, truly it was the people who should have been held accountable because either they weren't communicating or they were just doing whatever they wanted to do, no matter what was communicated.
Well, and it's hard to say. Is it a problem with the driver?
Right.
Is it a problem with the route? And I said too that if you're dropping off early and on the curb for this one customer, how many other customers are you dropping off on the curb, just leaving it unattended there for a while? So it wasn't just this one customer, right? So, and again, I'm talking to this manager with a distribution company, and I'm like, I don't know who the driver is. I'm not trying to get a driver in trouble, but you guys should be aware of this.
Right.
And
the thing that about this story that kind of drives me nuts too is that a huge, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a huge part of the issue with the tainted meat from the Jack in the Box outbreak was that the trucks were not properly refrigerated. And that was a huge part of the problem. So again, a distribution company failing in something that should have been kind of a basic thing that they should be taking care of. And
well, I hate to kind of pull Navy language or whatever, but that whole idea of, the chain is only as strong as the weakest link.
right.
With Jack in the Box, you had a major power outage in the greater Seattle area. You did have some trucks that were delayed and that were not, refrigerating the meat as the farther it went up the road. But you also had restaurants that literally the power came back on. They turned on the power. The power came back on. They turned on the ovens. And they didn't allow the heat to get properly heated up. And in some cases, this is why many, many years later, when we looked at the food code and there's elements, Hurricane Katrina was a good focal point of discussion around this. You have to have power, you have to have water.
Yeah.
Right? For a retail or restaurant. But there's other elements there too in terms of, okay, but you have to have water and you have to have the ability for employees to wash their hands properly. You have to have power, and we have to look at the fact that was your refrigerated food kept cold? Was your frozen food still frozen? Were you able to have long enough to get your ovens back up to temperature and all that kind of stuff? You can't just flip the switch and start going and cranking out revenue the minute power opens. You have to be ready once those utilities come back.
Right.
And with Katrina, there was even the issue of, okay, but do we need that for boxes of crackers and loaves of bread? You need that for the deli counter and the sandwich counter and the sushi counter and that kind of, but do you need for that? Because you can't have a one size fits all.
Right.
But we really got into these conversations about it's not just that you have power and water back. It's that you're able to properly wash, properly refrigerate, properly store, properly cook things.
Right. But
on top of the utilities are available.
Right. But my point is you've got the starting point, you've got the end point, both of which points are actually regulated to a certain degree, held accountable to a certain degree. My concern is, and the thing that seems like the kind of habitual failure in the system as well, is that middleman, which I don't hear a lot of people talking about, that distribution company.
Yeah.
I kind of brought that up when we were talking with Bill last time about the radioactive shrimp. And yeah, I agree that it probably was well played up bigger than it needed to be. And the fishermen had, serious issues because of it. And the Walmart was dinged significantly for that. And yet neither of them created the problem. It was the distributor. And, we talked to that one guy who works for a company that tracks, and help me with this. They're the ones that track how clean and how well maintained the distribution containers are, right?
In Europe.
Yes, in Europe.
ENFIT.
Right. ENFIT. And the whole thing of not only the distribution companies misunderstanding the cleaning process and believing that just because it's a higher number, meaning that it was getting cleaned higher, right?
Hold on, before you go further. So essentially there were 17 different grades of cleaning, and it was well, is it a flour truck of ground flour or salt, or is it chocolate or oil or cooking grade oil or whatever, and that there were different numbered settings of cleaning, and it had to do with the solutions used and the minutes and all that kind of stuff. But people assumed that the higher the number, the higher the price or whatever. And what they found out was that there were people that were applying it wrong, and then the manufacturer and even the retailer on both ends, like you were saying, they just assumed that the middlemen were doing the right thing,
Right.
and there was a disconnect there.
And that seems to me to be kind of an issue that I don't hear a lot of conversation around, which was kind of the point of why I wanted to talk about this story too, because this distributor treated you like you were the a-hole on this, because they don't want to be held accountable to whatever their justifications were for those actions, because they're rarely held accountable. From what I can see, they get away with a lot more.
Well, there are some companies, and this restaurant could be one of those companies that someday decides to go down this road.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some companies that they would never accept that shipment.
Yes.
Unless there was literally nonstop digital environmental monitoring that made sure that, temperature and all these different elements were within their spec, and that they go through meticulous vetting to make sure that whether it's the distribution company or all the different links in the chain in between,
Right.
we're all certified and qualified to do this. But literally, there are companies that use modern digital solutions to, if there's delivery, they won't accept it if, this actually dipped below the temperature, or this was this, or this wasn't verified this, or whatever it is.
Right.
And it's almost like it's not able to meet the requirements of the contract, and therefore they cannot accept it.
Right.
I mean, think about the level of control.
I think that is wonderful on the part of the restaurant or whoever the end consumer. Not the
customer.
The end customer that is going from, say, farm to grocery store, or farm to whoever is bringing it on the in between. They're holding them to a certain degree accountable. What I find interesting is, how often have we ever been to any of these conferences where that is any part of the conversation? The restaurant, grocery store, chain of whatever, they're always part of the conversation. The farm, the meat processing plant, all of that, they're a huge part of the conversation. I never hear the distribution channel as part of the conversation. And it, to me, seems like a glaring issue, a glaring hole in this whole from point A to point B to make the food to make it to your table.
Perhaps one thing to consider is that the distribution chain, and if you could see me, I'm using air quotes as I'm saying this, has drastically changed over the last decade. I mean, you have people that buy things directly from the manufacturer over the internet through Amazon or whatever. You have third-party shoppers. You have third-party delivery. You have third-party delivery from not only restaurants, but from retailers. And I'm not going to name any names, but I remember years ago, this was before the pandemic, being at an event where the conversation kind of was focusing on, the restaurant delivery, and what would we need to do to, whether it's certification or training or accountability in terms of those third-party restaurant food delivery that have only gotten more popular since then.
Yes.
And it wasn't so much that it's too difficult or it's too expensive. What scared me was that, we have to remember that in a way, if there's problems with those third-party delivery, that creates plausible deniability for us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, whoa, that is not the loophole.
Yeah. This is not the loophole you should be trying to slip through.
Right. And a loophole in accountability is not alternative accountability, is the lack thereof, and you just found a way to justify it within your ranks.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But I am happy to say that I've never seen boxes out in front of that restaurant.
That's awesome.
Like that. And I do go at various times.
Yeah.
And it seems like the hotter it gets, the earlier I go.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's I wherever you guys are listening from, I can tell you in California, we are having like our weather is so much hotter than it normally is this time of year, which, I'm a Californian. I'm not going to sit around and complain about it, but it is a little bit shocking. Somebody was like suggesting that we do a trip down to like Palm Desert in late May. And I'm like, because if it's already this hot here now, the desert in late May is probably going to be in the hundreds, and I am not going there then.
I do have to express that I feel a little bit of guilt though when I'm on a Zoom call with students like in Toronto or New England,
yes.
and they're all bundled up and talking about how cold it is, and it's like, yeah, I've been wearing shorts with nothing on my feet for 2 or 3 days straight now.
Yeah. I feel moderately guilty when we escaped the storm when we left Boston. We literally made it out just before the major
huge in February.
That like killed power everywhere. And I'm talking to like my East Coast friends and my cousin and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry for you. I'm so happy to be here in California.
Yeah. But you know what? This is meant to be a segue. You know what is, I'm not going to apologize for this. We moved out here 6 years ago. We both originally grew up out here, but living out here as an adult, we have the opportunity to do a lot of great things, including going to some plays. And
ooh, good transition.
You like that?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that in a previous episode we mentioned about how we're going to be seeing a play, and it's not just any play. It was a play that, first off, it's an Arthur Miller play called All My Sons.
Yep.
Written in 1946. It premiered in 1947.
Yeah.
Award-winning.
Yeah,
award-winning play.
Not only award-winning, but career-saving.
Oh, for him.
Arthur Miller even said that had this play not been a success, he may have moved on to doing something else, because he had literally just come off of a major Broadway flop, and he was completely disheartened by the whole thing. And then he wrote All My Sons, and it was a massive success.
And here's an interesting tidbit, if you didn't know this. It is from the play All My Sons, 1947, that we get the name of a relatively current and popular band. There was an element in the play in which nearly 24 pilots were killed during World War II. That's part of the central, not climax, but the
central conflict.
The central conflict.
Yeah.
That it's actually based on a real story, and it's woven into this play.
Right.
And one of the founding members of this band, I'll mention in a minute, was in college, and they had read or attended that play and was so impressed by the central message that it is from that the band 21 Pilots got its name.
That's right.
And I had learned this, and I shared this with you. And then we went to see something on stage, an interview with
another
Cameron
podcast,
Crowe.
a live recorded podcast that we've gone to a couple of times.
Yes, shout out to Tig Notaro and Cameron Crowe on
they were the guests.
Love It or Leave It.
Love It or Leave It, yes.
Podcast being recorded in LA. And you went in, and I was getting us drinks.
Yep.
And by the time I got there, you said, hey, there's a woman sitting next to us. She went outside, but she left her coat. Keep an eye on her coat. And then I'm like, okay, but you come back and you say, hey, you're not going to believe who this woman is who's sitting next to us. And who was she?
She was Cameron Crowe's niece.
And you're like,
Yeah, she was very excited to, first of all, talk about that. She was there to support her uncle because apparently he can get very shy. It was super, super sweet. Like, she's texting him while he's backstage kind of thing. I'm here. Anyway, we have all this time, so we struck up a conversation with her. And along the conversation,
she said she works for this playhouse.
That's right. And she was talking about what the next show, the one they were in rehearsal for.
And audience members, you're never going to guess what play she mentions here. What was it?
All My Sons.
And at that point, like a cartoon. My hair stood up on my arm. I was like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
I just mentioned this.
Yeah. It
Right?
was just crazy.
And
crazy.
you got us hooked up to do a table read
Yes, we did the masterclass.
in January.
Masterclass table read. And I think we talked about that
Yeah.
in depth in an earlier podcast.
And then finally this week,
yes,
we
Monday,
watched the play.
we finally got to see the show on Monday.
And talk about immersive. We
Yeah.
were front row, like literally our feet were on the fake AstroTurf, 3-4 feet away from the actors
Yeah.
engaging, in the scenes and the script and physically tossing each other in some cases.
Yeah, like at one point I was afraid, and I'm sure there's a whole scene where one character is pushing another character around, and I literally was afraid that other character was going to end up in one of our laps.
Yeah.
Because it was clearly very controlled fight. At the same time, it was real enough that I was like, oh my God, is this man going to end up in our lap?
But
So that was how close we were.
here's what's also weird, because not only is this an award-winning Broadway play, premiered in 1947, and here it is, 60, 70 years later, right? Doing the math, 60, 70, 80 years later, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 80 years later, essentially. You have a friend who's in this play up in
the
Berkeley,
Bay Area. Yep,
right?
up in Berkeley.
And we were talking with another person we're connected with in London, and he won tickets to it in the West End.
Yeah. Yeah. It's clearly a very timely production because we know of 3 productions going on exactly at this time, which means there's bound to be a couple more, I bet, somewhere.
Drop us a line if you're in the middle of somewhere and you know that it's going on in your town.
Exactly.
But I think the timeliness is important because the central issue of this play is accountability, denial,
spoiler alert if we talk about some of the plot of this play and you don't want to know the whole plot of the play, you may not want to listen to this whole section of the podcast because we will be giving away certain.
Well, it has been around for 80 years. You can literally go online and download the entire script in a PDF.
Go to ChatGTP and say, give me a synopsis of All My Sons.
But I'll tell you this, we did the table read. I read through it. We've done a lot of work, and I was still blown away.
Yeah,
blown
seriously.
away.
First of all, so we saw it at a theater called the Antaeus Theater, which is in Glendale, California. It's just a lovely little theater. What would you say, about 150 people?
I don't even know if it was that many people.
Maybe not even that many. Maybe even
small.
just 100. It
This is
was
a small
very
theater,
small. Small theater, small stage, but really, really just a lovely place. They have a whole library just offshoot from where you get your tickets, and the seats were super comfortable. It was a great place. Like if you're listening to this and live in California, I think their next show, this show is ending at the end of March 2026, which is this month. But the next show they're doing is Antigone. So just very cool. And I highly recommend going there. But
the cast was great.
The acting was phenomenal. And it was funny because we did the read through and there was one character who there was just so much more that I understood when you have truly good acting interpreting a show versus, a bunch of non-actors reading a script aloud, because there's just, and also not only good actors, but actors who've had the opportunity to spend time with the script and understanding their characters and stuff like that. It was really incredible to watch. There was one character in particular who I read her as kind of fun and freewheeling, and she came out hot. She was super combative and totally different than how when I was reading the script I saw, and yet it made more sense the way the interpretation of how it was acted.
Yeah.
It was a really cool experience, and I'm so glad we got to go see this show because it was phenomenal.
So you're probably listening to us and saying, okay, how did this turn into a Broadway podcast? Here's the thing. I could not help but be drawn back to 2 major events that I've had a lot of interaction with in terms of world of food safety during this play. during the table read back in January, I was at some points reading the role of the central character, Joe Keller. He's the patriarch. And it was as if I was reliving scenes from the Peanut Corporation of America.
Yeah.
The trial, the sentencing, the incident going on, the
like
level of
stuff
deniability.
This character said was like exactly what, almost word for word, what Stuart Parnell was saying in his defense and denial of any sort of accountability. Joe Keller had said those exact words in this play.
Oh, yeah.
All those years ago.
At one time, the character of Joe Keller told his son, Chris, well, we had to ship it, so we just shipped it, and they should have figured it out later.
Yep.
Now, mind you, I was in the Navy, and I always thought it was weird that we would get parts ordered from the Navy, and when we received them, we would still have to inspect these parts, but I think this is part of the reason why, because it was one more level of scrutiny over, is it actually, the right caliber, the right equipment, the right material, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But that whole idea of just ship it, they'll figure out later kind of a deal. I mean, central to the arguments against the Peanut Corporation of America was Stuart Parnell's email of just ship it.
Yep.
And there were so many other elements that were there. The other element, which I actually didn't feel nearly as much during the table read as I did when we were at the play, was, to me, the tree. When you walk into this theater, and it's common with every theater, you start off the very first scene of the very first act. There's a tree broken, and that tree, we come to find out, is a bit of a memorial tree for the family's son.
Yep.
That
had passed away we think he was a fighter pilot, so he passed away in a plane crash during the war.
But the mom and characters, they believe that he's still alive out there somewhere. There may be hope.
Right, because he's just listed as missing.
Right, he's not found. They don't have confirmation, so they're going to go with the hopeful. Now, believe me, I think that going with the optimistic with the hopeful is very powerful, but this was at least 3 years later.
Right.
And, but this tree was a memorial. This tree literally was in front of them as this living, breathing, although now it was knocked down, memorial for them. And to some extent, once the broken part was removed, it was almost as if it was less living memorial tree and more grave marker, more, cross in the ground kind of a marker. And I was immediately kind of recalling, the world premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival for Poisoned. Because we had just gone to the 9/11 memorial.
Yes.
And here's this impressive and powerfully emotional memorial in New York for the victims of 9/11. And here I am watching the premiere of the documentary, and this documentary is the closest thing that we have to a memorial, a monument, some kind of a marker, if you will, for all these failures. And when you look at the fact that some 3,000 people perished on 9/11, some 3,000 people perish every year due to failures in food safety, the juxtaposition of monument, memorial, no memorial, what does this mean, stuck with me. And I looked at that tree and thought that to them, that was their memorial and how much meaning it had for them. So there was that with Jack in the Box. And then again with the Peanut Corporation of America, some of the language of denial.
Yeah.
The distancing, the euphemisms. At one point, one of the characters said, 21 pilots were killed. And it was like, no, 21 planes went down. So it's okay to talk about 21 planes going down, but not to talk about
the pilots that were actually in the plane.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that was too real.
Yeah.
And that got me. Oh, there's also the letter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the letter is what kind of brings literally everything to a head. Because and that was what was so incredible about the show is you think that the main character Joe Keller is one of the main characters, but his son Chris is the other main character. And Chris believes every denial his dad
Yeah.
made.
Because he looked
That-
up to his dad.
He
His
looked
dad
up to
was
his
bigger
dad,
than life.
And his dad's business partner was the one who ended up
The scapegoat.
the scapegoat. He was the one who was imprisoned and stayed in prison because Joe goes to prison and he manages to argue and get out of prison on appeal. So, here he sees himself as this big triumphant man, and his son kind of worships him and believes everything because his son is just optimistic and believes in the good in the world. So when he discovers that his dad is not telling the truth, that was first a huge climax in the play, because just the disillusionment
Right.
that he experienced, and just how violent the disillusionment, the anger, because he really wanted to believe his dad so bad.
Well, that letter, which by the way was written by the son who died.
Right.
I don't want to give too much away, but that letter reminded me, because there was an effort. No, don't read it, kind of a thing, right? Because it was going to just make it a little too real what was going on.
Because the mother even says, and we've already given a spoiler alert, so I have no compunction spoiling certain parts of the play.
It's been around since 1947.
Yeah, exactly. But the mother says in the play, your dad, just before the climax, when Chris is recognizing that he's been in denial the whole time, and the mother says something to the effect of, your dad can't be responsible because then it means he killed Larry. That he is responsible for the death of Larry, but Larry didn't fly the same airplane as the type of plane that went down. So to Chris, that was a bit of cognitive dissonance, because dad can't possibly have been responsible for Larry. But it is what you just said. It becomes too real. The whole issue of everything becoming just a little bit too real, that when the letter comes out, and the letter is basically to the female lead of the show. So there's Joe Keller and his wife Kate. Kate. Yeah, his wife Kate. And then there's his son Chris and his romantic interest,
Annie.
Yes. And throughout the whole play, Chris and Annie are kind of courting, and Annie, she knows that Chris really wants to propose to her, and they're going to get married and all of that stuff. Annie also believes that Joe was innocent, and that her father, who was the business partner, was the villain in all of this. Anyway, comes to find out that Annie knows that Larry is dead, because Larry essentially wrote a suicide note and sent it to her because of his devastation of his father's responsibility that he killed 21 pilots. And this whole accountability finally comes forth when people actually read this devastating letter.
In my perspective, though, I saw a clear parallel between the moment where they're like, no, don't read the letter because we don't want it to become too real.
Yes.
And the sentencing with Peanut Corporation of America, because the defense attorneys tried unsuccessfully to prevent the victims' families from providing testimony during the sentencing phase. They did not want that real story out. And, that's when you have names and faces and stories and lives behind the data and stuff like that. And when we have that distance with the denial, it was just numbers. Right. No, These are real stories, these are real things. And here, here's where, the language of denial is such that it's easier to stay within things if you've minimized it, if you've dehumanized it, if you're using it to justify that it's not a really big thing.
Right. Well, because isn't it true that even in Peanut Corporation of America, they were never convicted of killing anybody.
Yeah,
even
actually,
though all
you're
these
right.
people died from that,
Yeah.
there's still that distance of they
Yeah.
were convicted for a whole slew of misdeeds, but never for actually, quote, killing anybody.
Right. Because that's like too difficult to prove in a court of law, even though it's like everyone knows this, right?
Right.
But they broke so many other. It's kind of like the whole Al Capone being arrested for tax evasion.
Tax evasion, yes.
But with the Peanut Corporation of America, we're talking obstruction of justice. There were so many wire fraud. I don't remember all of them now, but there were so many
Wasn't
federal
there like
charges.
so many charges that they stopped collecting evidence?
Yeah,
because
I was talking to someone who was working with the investigators. Like they had so much evidence of all these other crimes that like let's stop. Let's just focus on those crimes. And you realize there was almost 100 charges against all of the different players there.
Yeah.
But if we look beyond the Peanut Corporation of America, we can even find some more recent examples of companies that have had deadly failures.
Yeah.
And the way they talk about it, like a year later, is, yeah, we're sorry that some people got harmed. These things happen.
Some people got harmed. That was the thing that like really upset me about the stuff that's now coming out a year later. They are playing it down so much. Some people got harmed.
Yeah.
Like,
it's the cost of doing business.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's the thing that just really is the most disheartening, is just downplaying the amount of illnesses and deaths that was caused due to those failures.
Well, in the play, the son talked about having been in the war. He was a leader of his men and
Yes.
the culture. He went on talking about some of the stories with his men and that culture there and how he saw the need to be responsible to his men, right? And clearly there was a different view of leadership culture with the patriarch, Joe Keller, in
Right.
terms of, oh yeah, my business partner, good guy, but he was a little man when he did this. And there are all the excuses kind of thing, right? But if we today focus on a food safety culture and a leadership culture, it can't be a culture that finds loopholes, euphemisms, and distancing in terms of that language of deniability in terms of the realities, because now it spills over into likelihood and severity and what is really expected of leaders in any kind of area of industry.
Yeah. But what you just said, it reminded me of something that you had also made the parallel to. What was it? Remember, if Joe Keller is talking about his business partner who went to prison and talking about him being a small man, a weak man, all of that stuff, and he deserved to go to prison, that was exactly parallel to what Stuart Parnell said to you on the phone.
Oh, yeah. There was the... and I wrote about this years ago. This is probably 10 years ago I wrote about this. I had done a series of interviews with the families of the victims. And Stuart Parnell's family reached out to me and said, hey, we need to talk because there's more of the story. And so here we are at a period of time between the
Conviction and sentencing.
Yes, between the trial and the sentencing phase, which were like a year apart.
Yeah.
And I'm on the phone with Stuart Parnell, and we're just chatting it up. And he's, talking away, deniability, denying. A lot of denial from his part. And
Yeah.
I'm reminding him that I lost a son with the Jack in the Box case. And his response was, oh, yeah, those guys, that was horrible. Those guys should have gone to prison for what they did. They broke the law, but not me.
But not me. Yeah.
And if you recall also from the sentencing phase, they had the defense brought up character witnesses who talked about how he has boats and he meets up with people around the world, and he has planes and he meets up with people around the world, and he does those angel flights where a kid needs surgery in another city.
Yep.
He, out of the goodness of his heart, he flies people, to do those surgeries, that kind of stuff. And they literally made him out to be the Mother Teresa that wears pants kind of a scenario.
Right.
Well, they did not want any of the victims to talk
speak.
at all.
Yep.
And the actions of his sister, which we're not going to go into this in the podcast, but I guarantee you, I've written about it. You will not believe
why the U.S. Marshals grabbed, yanked, and hauled Stuart Parnell's sister out of that courtroom.
Yep.
That's another story. Maybe we'll talk about another time. But the contrast between those people talking about the reality of their actions and the way they were trying to portray him as some bigger than this person.
Right.
Even the judge says, you may be a very good person, but you weren't at that time, and we're only focusing on those actions.
Right. Right.
Now, mind you, he also thought he was only going to go to prison for maybe 3 months. 28 years was a shock.
Yeah. Which again is a super parallel to All My Sons, in that there's a point in the play where Joe keeps going on about how, oh, well, everybody knows I'm innocent. Everybody absolutely respects me. Everybody likes me.
We play
being
cards.
back in town. We play cards together and all that stuff. And yet later, when Joe is not in the room, there's another major character who essentially says, oh, yeah, we all know that he's guilty.
Yeah.
But we have to have he's part of the community. What are we going to do?
Well, there's a
You know?
sense sometimes from leaders that consumers will become myopic. And that might be true in the past, but social media does not,
Forget.
Yeah. It's like, you can't get rid of that video. You can't get rid of this. And here, what is it? 33 years later, and we still talk about Jack in the Box. All these years later, after
Yeah.
Chipotle, we still talk about Chipotle. All these years after Peanut Corporation America, we still talk about Peanut Corporation America, because these were major mileposts, if you will, of where on our journey in this culture of food safety, we have seen some major bottlenecks, some major challenges to how we define the law, how we define policy, why we revise policy, and how we understand our culture around us.
Yeah.
And we hold on to some of these things. And guess what? Sometimes we can't forget that consumers out there remember this too.
Yeah.
Even the ones who say, well, now, of course I'm going to eat Jack in the Box, or of course I'm going to eat a Chipotle because they got to be better now. Okay. Yeah. But there's also those who are like, I will never step foot in that place because, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. I blew that, didn't I?
You totally blew it. It's
All right.
the other way around.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah.
And, today that FAFO,
Yeah.
it's not the leaders who are FAing and finding out. You were worried about how I was going to get through that one, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's consumers.
Yeah.
We are the ones who are finding out.
Yeah.
We are the ones who are finding out that, this company's labels or promises are not what they cracked up to be, or this company's, championing themselves for their food safety culture is not what it's all chalked up to be, or that, by the way, gas prices are going up, and no wonder we're going to see prices with our food increase and all these other things. No wonder we're going to start questioning things about authenticity and all these different things, because there's going to be loopholes or shortcuts or opportunities for economic fraud because prices are so high.
Right.
And who is always the people who are the finding out? These are the people who are always the ones who are impacted. It's the consumer.
Right.
And
with social media, which is a whole topic we're going to get into in another episode, with social media,
I like that.
While the companies are the FAing and consumers are FOing, the consumers with social media are also helping those those companies find out.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be kind of one way.
Yep.
Information came from industry to consumers. Now, consumers are contributing information to the industry. And, of all things, I know this, we did not talk about this in advance.
No, and we're going long. But.
Okay. Well, I'll end it with this. It's kind of cool to see how even the new leadership at Burger King has really turned things around in terms of they're listening to their consumers, because they realize that so many corporate leaders within the fast food industry, they are not listening to consumers.
Right.
And so this is not about food safety, but the idea that it's not impossible for companies and for leadership at these companies to really pay attention to their customers a lot more. There are great examples of this.
Yep.
Along that journey down the road. And hopefully we start celebrating more successful mileposts and elements than the negative ones along the way.
Yeah.
So in closing, if you ever get a chance to see All My Sons, I highly recommend you look at it through a food safety. It has nothing to do with food safety.
Nothing at all.
Look at it through a food safety lens, and even look at just corporate industry beyond the airline parts that they were making, beyond the fact that it took place in the 40s. You know, this was a post-World War story that was impacted by what happened during World War II. It's so relevant today. It's so relevant in New York, in California, in London. It is so relevant in our modern times. And, you know, there's always a question about like the arts, the role of the arts. Mm-hmm. Even in Star Trek's Starfleet Academy, there was an episode where the cadets had to read part of Our Town.
That's right.
As healing after a major event happened in the storyline. And there were people that are like, oh, why are we burdening our leaders with the arts? Well, maybe there's a reason.
Right.
Maybe there's a reason. And it has nothing to do about understanding the arts per se, but understanding the value of what the arts can tell us about the human condition, about our social contract, about responsibility and leadership.
Yes.
And in this case, it did not fail.
Yeah. Anyway, it is that time again, babe.
It is. And I'm not going to apologize for us going long this time. I really think that it is always a scenario where everything is so connected that sometimes it's hard to kind of partition off part of the story and only focus on a very siloed element of the story.
Yeah, no, absolutely the truth. And our conversations can often go much longer than that. And
I hold no ill will against anyone who plays our podcast at 1.5 or 1.25 speed.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to Confessions of a Food Safety A-Hole. As always, we thank you to all of our new and returning listeners because we really appreciate you. We hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a bit of a theatrical review episode over a food safety one, but I think we made some pretty good parallels between the two. Anyway, please like, comment, and follow our podcast. And if you have any questions or wish to give us feedback directly, you can also email us at pepnexusinfo@gmail.com. pepnexusinfo@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Do you have anything else to say, Darin?
Yeah. You know, I'm hoping to interact with some folks. We have a lot of things coming up. We're going to be at the Western Food Safety in Salinas in May. We're also going to be at Food Safety Summit and National Restaurant Association.
Yeah.
And at Michigan State University, their event in May. But month of May is going to be big for us in terms of whether in California or Chicago, plenty of opportunities to step up and say hi and let us know what you thought. Maybe share an idea of something we should talk about. But I'd love to talk with some folks, and always a pleasure to spend time at these events.
All right. Well, thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.